and welcome to Lay It Out, the No Bullshit Science podcast.
With extra bullshit.
I'm Kiri.
And I'm Alice.
And she's the Melda. And today we have the return of our regular Lay. Well, not so regular, Sophie.
Hi.
Welcome back, Sophie.
Cheers, guys. Nice to be invited back.
Have you missed us?
So much. Every week I've been like, why won't they talk to me?
Do you know what, right? Because we, like, genuinely, we did that whole introduction of you as our regular Lay so close before lockdown. And then lockdown happened and we realised we had the whole internet at our fingertips. And we forgot about it.
I just tell you the actual history. Okay, so you introduced me as your regular Lay, never aired the episode, reintroduced me just before lockdown, and then you didn't speak to me for 4 months.
Did we never air that episode?
No, you didn't.
Oh, fuck.
No, it's the one about the language, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think it was when you just sort of like, just before Christmas and like didn't do a couple.
Yeah, we did kind of tail off at one point.
Yeah, that's really annoying actually, because that was quite an interesting paper as well.
As a bonus episode, feature me.
Yeah, we could do that. We could do a retrospective.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
You should just reintroduce me every time I do this. It's like, and we're having Sophie as our regular Lay.
And we'll just think that we've got multiple friends called Sophie.
We'll just have you back every 4 months, and like that makes it regular, right? If you keep your regular schedule.
Yeah.
Okay, great, thanks.
That is true.
So how's your lockdown been going?
Yeah, fine. I mean, I'm quite lucky because I live in a decent sized flat with someone that I've managed to actually get along with. Like, we're still speaking, which I think on lockdown terms is pretty good. And because my work, like I work in a medical translation field, so that like hasn't gone anywhere. I always work remotely, so actually like I'm in probably one of the best positions. And like the course I was doing the classroom based one, but the university offers the same course online, so they already had all the tech ready to go. So we just switched to online for the last few weeks of that. So actually, yeah, I really can't complain, to be honest.
So life didn't really change that much.
No, I mean, it felt kind of weird. Like, it didn't, but in some ways it didn't feel as weird as I thought it would, because like I was used to sort of like making myself go out, because my job means literally don't ever have to get dressed. You know, I can literally just sit at home and do my job. And so but like that's horrible. So I would go out and make myself like participate in society. Whereas now I'm like, you know, I'm staying at home, but so is everybody else. And so it doesn't feel that weird. Whereas before, if I didn't go out, I was like, well, everyone else is out. So yeah, it's actually, life hasn't changed that much, but just little things are weird. Like I used to go across like the whole of London kind of like it was nothing, and now I sort of don't go past London Bridge, you know. But yeah.
And if the first time you do, you're probably gonna like, I don't know, something really bad's gonna happen.
Cool, great.
That sounded really morbid, but you know the way, like, well, I don't know, because I was gonna say that for me, but actually I've been going on cycles, so I have actually been going kind of far away. But back home, my family, the rules in Ireland, you had to stay within a 2 kilometre radius of your house for most of lockdown. You weren't allowed to go further than 2 kilometres. So they all had these little like 2 kilometre circles that they weren't allowed to go past. And I was like, it's not like, I'd say people are just gonna get really anxious when they have to go outside their 2 kilometre circles now. But they did it gradually to like ease everyone back in. So they went from 2 kilometres to 5 kilometres to 15 kilometres. And now I think you're allowed to go wherever you want. But yeah.
Alice, you're going to give Sophie agoraphobia or something.
I know, but that's what I'm getting at. I think everyone's going to have agoraphobia.
Maybe.
I don't like, oh my God, the north of London.
I've been really missing, I never miss clubs, but I've been really missing clubs. Like the past 2 weeks, actually maybe the past 3 weeks, I've been really wanting to go out.
Yeah.
And I know that that's like going to be the last thing to ever open. And when I get to go out, I'm probably going to hate it because there's going to be too many people.
Yeah.
But I really want to go out.
I know what you mean. I kind of I like want to be like, not in a tube sense, more in like a, like, you know, when you're on a dance floor and like there's not really that much room, but like you're just like throwing your shapes in your little circle kind of thing.
Yeah, I really want to be drunk and dance.
Yeah, I do want to dance.
Same on your own, is it?
Yeah, and I think there's not actually that many things about life that I've missed, but for some reason I'm really missing that right now.
Anytime I'm watching TV and they're like in a nightclub or there's like really like fun music on or something, I get this intense like longing.
Oh.
I just want to be there.
Anyway, one day, maybe in 2022, all the clubs will be able to open as normal.
My God.
I'd say that's probably being optimistic. Nah, maybe it's not. I don't know.
I booked a holiday for April 2021 to Italy, so fingers crossed for that, at the in-between waves.
I think you might be okay then.
Yeah.
I hope. Hopefully. The prices are so good that we've got like 100% refunds and stuff, like if possible. So we kind of just thought, let's just book it.
Yeah.
And it's not too bad if we can't go.
Yeah. To be honest, that's way smarter than. I'm sorry if anyone who's done this is listening, but those people that are like, oh, we can travel soon and have booked holidays for like August.
Yeah, that seems risky.
It's a bit silly, I think.
I was talking to another colleague of mine who is Greek, and she was due to fly home to Greece on Saturday, and the Greek government just this week are after banning flights from the UK.
This is the thing. I don't think that anyone's going to have any problem leaving the UK. I just don't see many countries letting them in.
No.
Yeah, I agree. That's my concern. It's just going to go no.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Should we go on to the science then? Because this is actually quite a long paper.
Oh, interesting. I just have some fun news first that I need to tell you all about.
Yeah, what's happened? Give it to us. What is that?
I got a COVID test.
Oh, exciting!
I know. I haven't done it yet.
Wait, is this from that study?
Gross.
So this is one of the ones so KCL, our university, are doing a like wellness kind of survey that we fill in every 2 weeks, and as part of that, it said that you might get a antibody test, and I got mine in the post yesterday, and it's actually quite cool. So first of all, they do give you this big disclaimer about the fact that like it's not a clinical test, it's a research test, so it's not like the one that's promoted by the government and stuff like that, but they tested it in 29 people who had COVID, and it picked it up in 28 of them. So I think that says it's 96% specific or something like that. And then they tested it in, I think, 150 people who didn't have COVID, and it said in 100% of them that they didn't have it. So it seems as though it could be. I know 29 isn't that many, but like.
Yeah, because I've got two friends who are doctors, and they both had antibody tests and came back negative, and one of them works in A&E and didn't have PPE, so she's like, it doesn't see how that can be possible. And my other friend who's a doctor, her mum had COVID, they live in the same house, my friend went to the hospital with her and hers came back negative, and she was like, how is that possible?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know what to think about these things, because it seems like there's like an issue with the threshold or something. I don't know. Just saying words.
Yeah.
But when we heard that, we were all like, what?
Yeah. It does sound to me as though the tests they have aren't like super great. Like I remember when they were reporting how many tests they'd done, and then if you kind of like read the disclaimer bit, it was like that wasn't the number of people they've tested. Like some people have to be tested 3 times before they get a positive result.
Mm-hmm.
Because they think because their viral load might be really low, so then their antibody response is really weak, and then the test doesn't pick it up.
Yeah. Which, by the way, I thought reporting those figures was so shady.
Yeah.
Then they're like, oh look, we've done this million tests, but if you quickly look at it, it looks like that's how many people they've tested.
Yeah.
But it's probably like half of that number that they've actually tested.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had a coronavirus test because I've been filling in that app, the one that you can like put your symptoms in and stuff. And I think I had one symptom, and the symptoms are literally anything, it seems. And I'm pretty sure it's because I was hungover rather than anything else. But I got an email from the research team being like, do you want a coronavirus test? The government's given us a certain number for like research. And I was like, yeah, I want to get involved. I didn't know what that meant. And then like it was just disgusting. It was gross. And like my flatmate wanted to be involved because she's a biologist, but then she didn't want to be too involved. And I like described to her that I've got to like, you have a swab, and all over this like sheet, it's like you've got to like the same swab goes in your throat and your nose. And I was like, oh, but I'd already registered with the post office, so they were going to pick up something, so I had to do it.
Oh shit. So this one is that's an antibody test, that's a COVID test. Yeah, this one is just a pricking your finger job. So not as like, I actually think pricking my fingers, I find that easier than having to swab my own nose and throat with the same
throat
swab.
was fun, she had to move it around. That's the bit that I didn't expect, and I was like gagging. I was like, oh.
Yeah.
So my flatmate was like, oh, like she counted to 10 for me because she had to do it for 10 seconds, but she like did it outside the room because she was like, I'm not watching this happen.
That's a long time.
Yeah,
It is. I was like, oh my god.
I'm excited. I should be getting one of those tests soon, and I'm quite excited.
Yeah, I might do it after the podcast, and I'll let you all know.
Cool. Oh, and then we can all report back next week if we're COVID free.
I
hope I've had it.
I kind of hope I've had it too. I reckon I did.
Yeah, I reckon I did too.
Yeah, so I remember in sort of February-ish, I got really ill, and it kind of felt like the flu. But the main thing was that I thought this was just blocked sinuses, but I lost my sense of taste and smell. And I remember that specifically because I was going to really nice restaurants with my brother, and I couldn't fucking taste anything, and I was really sad about it. And so I'm like, maybe I had it.
Maybe.
And it would be quite nice if I just had it, and then not that I don't need to worry because some people are getting it twice, but at least I can worry a little bit less.
Mm-hmm.
I still think the twice thing is that they just haven't they haven't gotten over it properly.
Maybe. I heard that some people are having 2 different strains of it. Yeah. But I don't think we know very much. Do you know what is actually kind of annoying about the whole science of COVID right now is I'm having quite a few conversations with people these days who they're getting really frustrated that the guidance keeps changing. So they'll be like, oh, this is so ridiculous. No one knows what they're doing the fact that they're changing the guidance all the time just shows that they don't know what they're doing. And, you know, as a science podcast, I feel I should tell you that that's not the case. It's because that we're discovering something new. And I think it seems like things are changing so much because the public are never privy to every step-by-step discovery of a new thing. Uh-huh. And also the scientific community is moving really, really fast with COVID, which is why it feels like things are changing all the time, but they're not. They're just discovering new things about something that was unknown.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, like the politicians and the media who are sort of like giving out the information are not going to be giving the sort of complexities of the actual scientific advice either, isn't it? So it's kind of like, you know, pick your sources, I think.
Yeah.
And they're also not giving they're not making the decisions. I know they keep saying this, but they're definitely not making them just purely based on the science. Like, they're taking into account the economy and they're taking into account all these other things. Mm-hmm. So, like, it's not all science's fault.
Yeah. Speaking of science, let's talk about some science. This is completely non-corona related science. So, before this episode, I had 2 options of papers, and I asked Sophie if she wanted to hear about sleep and food or dog memory. And I was really hoping she'd pick the dog memory because I wanted to talk about dogs, and she did. This is kind of interesting. We'll go into it. There's a very big psychology component, which I found quite difficult because as a biologist, we write in very short, concise sentences, whereas psychologists don't. So when I had to try and understand what they were talking about, it was kind of difficult because they write in very like a flowery language.
I think that's just as a trainee psychologist. I think it depends.
I would also say I think the short sentences also depends.
Yeah. Okay. Fine.
Some things I've written some very long sentences.
Yeah. Okay. To be fair. Okay. Fine. Let me rephrase. The work that goes into this paper specifically is quite philosophical.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think maybe the philosophy side of psychology is a bit more flowery than the people that use like EEG and stuff. Maybe.
I think maybe you're generalizing based on this one person. Dare I say?
Okay, fine. This person.
This one person.
It's not even this person. It's because I was looking up something that they talk about. So when I was trying to understand it, it took me ages to understand it. Anyway, I think I've got it. And it's quite deep and it's quite cool. So this is called the mental representation of episodic-like memory of own actions in dogs. Now, so a little bit of background. Now, this is what took me fucking forever to try and understand. But basically, there's this thing called self-representation. And this is it's a psychology term. And it's basically the image that you have of yourself based on your own interpretation of yourself and understanding that you are your own physical being in the world.
Question.
Yes.
Is it like your physical impression of yourself or your like overall impression?
Overall. So this can be split into several things of your physical self, your social standing, and your memories and experiences and how that makes you an individual compared to everyone else.
Okay.
And then on a human level, the way that this then translates into like more higher consciousness thinking is that it allows you to make decisions about your future.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah. So basically they're saying, so they were saying that the first self-representation happens when you're a baby, and basically the minute that a baby can recognize itself in the mirror as itself, so you know they do the red dot test on the nose. So for anyone who doesn't know, with babies, one of the tests that they do is they'll draw a little red dot on the baby's nose and put the baby in front of a mirror, and if the baby tries to wipe the mirror, then they don't understand that what they're looking at is themselves, and when they can understand that, they will wipe their own nose.
Too soon to interject, because I was actually watching something about this today, and babies aren't passing that test typically until around 18 months.
Yeah.
But they did a study slightly differently, where they had like a baby and they gave it a mirror, and they were like just and watched what the baby did, but in like the other group they had the baby in the same place, but instead of a mirror they had an adult who would mimic the baby's exact movements. And basically, although little babies aren't passing the sort of self-representation test until 18 months, babies as young as 4 months will interact with the person mimicking their behavior, but they don't have any interest particularly in the mirror. So it seems like they notice that the person across the room is like a social engagement, whereas the mirror isn't, which I thought was very interesting.
Interesting. But is it that they recognize that it's a social engagement, or they recognize that this person like 20 times my size is sitting in front of me?
It's that they react differently, like, so they don't look at themselves as someone to interact with, because babies do interact with like other babies. In this instance, they needed to be an adult because they need someone who could mimic the behavior. I think it was just the fact that they recognized a social person and then recognized something that wasn't.
All right. Interesting.
So I feel like Sophie is becoming less and less lay.
I agree.
I love how I feel like a three-way science conversation today.
I actually got that from a Netflix documentary called Babies. So anyone who's watched that, really good.
Okay, so now this ability to mentally represent your own actions, so your self-representation in non-human animals, isn't very well known at all, and it's considered, this ability to have self-representation is considered like a higher consciousness of thinking. So it's one of those things which is what makes humans different from other animals. So in humans and monkeys, it's been quite widely studied and acknowledged that it's a thing, but there is a little bit of work coming out now that's showing that maybe it's not just in primates. So rats and dolphins have been used in studies to show that maybe they have it as well. But the only issue is that there's a lot of training involved in these sorts of tests. So that at this point they can't really say, is this the fact that these animals have been trained to do this, or is it genuinely that they are aware of what they're doing?
Rats are so smart. I bet you rats now.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Rats are like, this is me. Rats are probably have little sassy personalities and stuff, I'd say.
Oh, I reckon so. Rats are really cool.
Yeah.
I reckon you either get like really, really sassy rats or like super nerdy rats.
Yeah.
What's a nerdy rat like?
Like they're just really clever.
Yeah, they're probably the ones that like are like the masterminds of getting into like, you know, people's houses and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool.
So the traditional way of testing this, like babies, is to see if these animals can recognize themselves in a mirror. But this is quite limited because it only tests one aspect of this self-representation, which is the visual side of it. And so, you know, there might be some animals that have evolved to have that aspect of self-representation. Like dogs, for example, it doesn't really benefit them to recognize themselves in a mirror and like wipe dirt off their tail or something. There's like, it doesn't really affect them.
No, because dogs actually like having dirt on their tail.
Yeah, well, there we go.
They do.
So the second part of this is, so there was the mental representation, and then the other part of the title was episodic like memory. So episodic memory is your memory of your personal events. So it's your ability to remember what happened before, a past event in your life. And in humans, this is considered evidence of us being able to have self-representation because it implies that we can represent ourselves in the past. Like we recognize ourselves in the past. See, this is what Alice is giving me the look that I had when I was reading about this.
I just, you know, when you're following and then all of a sudden you're just not anymore.
Yeah. So the fact that we can remember past events means that we can place ourselves in the past.
Okay.
And we recognize that that was our experience in the past, and we can use those experiences to plan the future.
Okay, so animals that don't have this, would they just have this crazy brain where like their past memories, they don't know why they're even in their heads?
I think so. I think it's the fact that any memories that animals have of what they think that the memories animals have of the past are like an instinctual thing or like an animalistic thing. Yeah. So they'll recognize something that happened in the past as survival, but not necessarily that it happened to themselves.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure that like a lot of like some human memory anyway involves like the prefrontal cortex and the executive control, which animals and stuff don't have. So the kind of memories they have are going to be in their like amygdala, so it's all kind of, you know, emotional fight or flight kind of. So they're not going to like, you know, consciously necessarily like remember their things, but they're going to have like memories of danger.
Mm-hmm.
Can I just say right now, I think I'm actually more lay than Sophie today. I feel like I'm asking more questions.
I was just thinking.
I might have made that up, but it sounds like legit. I'm pretty sure it is.
No, that sounds very legit. Like,
yeah. I was just thinking, I don't think we should have Sophie as our regular lay anymore.
But I didn't realize it was going to be such a psychology thing.
Also, you bring an interesting perspective, like of a non-biologist.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Maybe we can have her as our lay, but we just can't do psychology.
Okay. Yeah, I won't do any more psychology papers after this.
Sorry, Sophie. We are essentially discussing your future on the podcast in front of you.
You've introduced me 3 times as your regular lay, and you're firing me.
We're firing you.
No.
Firing you in person.
We're not firing you. We're just setting the conditions of your employment.
Okay.
Yeah.
You do not have any you don't get like any holiday benefits or anything like that, I'm afraid. We can't afford to give those to you.
We also can't afford to pay you. So you're not an employee.
Well, it's been fun. Thanks guys. I'll see you next time.
Right, so this episodic memory is memory of personal events. And quite a crucial criteria of episodic memory, which is what fails in these tests where the animals have to be trained, is that it needs the test that they do for you to recall a memory, it needs to be unexpected. Because otherwise, if it's an expected memory, then your brain will know that it's important information and store it in a different way. So it needs to store this information as something that's maybe not that important, and then we can really test if you have this episodic memory where you have memory of like these past events that don't necessarily mean anything. So basically they wanted to test if dogs had this. So they wanted to test the dog's ability to repeat trained actions and non-trained actions, and to counter the second point I made about it needs to be unexpected information. They tested them in situations where training is not expected. So we're going to go into the results now. I was going to do the methods and the results separately, but they did like 20 different tests on these dogs, and I thought we'd lose track. So I've now combined them, and we'll be going through them together. So they used 10 dogs in this whole test.
What kind of dogs?
They didn't say. Well, maybe they did say, and I just haven't seen it. Demelza gave me this look as if I was stupid for suggesting that they didn't say.
I mean, you know, you have to disclose what kind of rats you're working with.
That's true. Okay, Demelza, can we find the dogs, please? Oh, and I suppose some dogs are more stupid than others.
Yeah, like Labradors are really, they're quite smart.
Yeah, Labradors are super smart.
That's why they're guide dogs.
Yeah. Apparently, Labradors are so smart that most of them, when they reach a certain age, will just stop listening to their owner.
Like, I've had enough of you, shut up.
Yeah, like, I know how to control myself better than you do. Right, so the first lot of tests they did are potentially expected tests. So the first test is called the baseline repeat test, and they had 12 trials, and all that they asked to do was to the owner would ask their dog to perform and repeat 6 actions, and they would do this 12 times. They then also did an untrained action test. This was 12 trials again, and the dog was asked to perform actions that it was already trained to do, but it had never been asked to repeat. Right?
How is it trained to do something but never been asked to repeat something?
So in the baseline repeat trial, they're given 6 commands that they are trained to repeat. So they are given 12 trials where they're repeating those exact 6 commands. So then in this untrained action, it's something that isn't in those 6 commands.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Kind of.
Yeah.
Carry on.
Okay, so then basically in this repeat training, all 10 dogs are successful at repeating their trained and untrained actions. Yay, clever dogs. They then had a doing nothing test. And in this one, the dog was asked to stay in a seating position for 5 seconds. And then they were given the repeat command. So then the dog would have to sit again, carry on sitting still for another 5 seconds. And basically this is testing how flexible these dogs are at sort of generalizing that repeat command. So are they associating it exactly with the 6 actions at the beginning, or are they generalizing it with just, you know, in general? Demelza, what do I normally say?
Silent ding ding ding.
Oh, silent Demelza fact.
Jesus, it's been that long.
The dogs were 1 Chihuahua, 1 miniature poodle, 1 Shetland sheepdog, 5 border collies, 2 mixed breeds, and 2 mixed breeds that lived as family dogs with their owners.
That's cute. I thought we're all going to be the same.
These are very different dogs.
Yeah, they are.
Like in my head, Chihuahuas are way dumber than border collies.
Yeah, you think they should have a control dog or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, border collies are definitely smart, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
They're sheepdogs, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My friend had border collies are super, super active because they're working dogs. And my friend had a border collie who they'd have to really rein her in when she went for walks because she would run so much until her paws bled.
Aww.
She just had so much energy, so they had to kind of rein her in, which is cute. Anyway, so they wanted to test how flexible these dogs were with this repeat command. Do they understand that it means repeat what you've just done, or do they think that it means repeat those 6 actions that they did at the beginning? And 9 out of 10 dogs stayed in the position for at least 5 seconds, so they passed the test. Well done. 1 dog laid down after 4 seconds. Which, I mean, they were nearly there.
Really?
That was the Chihuahua.
I know, I was thinking that was definitely the Chihuahua.
I'm going to say it was the Chihuahua. I'd say the Chihuahua was like, fuck this. I'm not sitting down.
Because Chihuahuas are pretty sassy, aren't they?
Yeah, I feel like they are.
So then the next test they did was called the Clever Hands Control. And basically this controls for maybe involuntary cues that the owner might do with their hands or their face that the dog can pick up on to mean something. So what they did is they got the owner and a friend of the owner to stand back to back. The friend would call the dog, so the dog would come to the friend. The owner would close their eyes and ears and sing very loudly to ensure that they can't hear what the dog is doing. And then the friend would ask the dog to perform an action that the dog is trained in using only visual cues. Then the owner and the friend would swap places, and then the owner will say repeat. And then they'll see if the dog will repeat the actions that they were instructed to do by the friend. I just wanted to ask at this point, if you guys were in this test and you had to sing a song, what would you sing? I think I would sing Twinkle Twinkle Little Star.
Oh my god, the first thing that came to mind for me was Baba Black Sheep. Why is it nursery rhymes?
I don't think you can say sheep in front of the border collies.
Oh yeah, fair. Okay, I'm gonna have to rethink that.
I think I can't remember what it's called. Like Don't Stop Believing.
Oh. What by Train?
I think so. Maybe. There's a lot of like songs that have like similar words. I can't remember which ones I like and which ones I don't, but I feel like it'd be one of those.
Okay. Okay, so with this test, where they were trying to control for cues that might happen involuntarily, all 10 dogs successfully repeated their own actions, even when the command was given by someone who didn't know the dog.
So is all of this working towards evidence that they are aware of themselves?
Yes.
Okay. How?
We're going into it.
Okay.
Because this is just training, right? This part. We will go into these unexpected tests, which is more evidence that they have that these memories are being stored unexpectedly.
Yeah.
The final expected test they had is called the Who is Acting test. And what they did was the dog was randomly asked to repeat its own action or imitate the owner's action. And they did 12 trials of either repeating their action, imitating the owner, or imitating the owner and repeating their own action. So it's just to see if they could tell the difference between those things and if they can remember what they just did. And these dogs all performed very well, and they didn't differ from what their usual baseline performance is. Well done, doggies.
Imagine if this was your PhD. You just get to hang out with dogs all day.
I know! Like, no offense to these people, but I don't see the point in this research except to hang out with cute dogs. Right, so we then go into unexpected tests. Now, this would be the tests that really show us whether these dogs have episodic memory, which is what these guys are arguing is a real way, is a true way of seeing whether these dogs have self-representation. And that it needs to be tested in a way where the dogs don't realise that the tests are going to happen, because otherwise you can't really prove that it's episodic memory. So the first test they did was called the spontaneous action test. And what this means is that the owner would just sit somewhere that's familiar to a dog. So this could be on a park bench or in their living room. And the owner would be ignoring the dog. So they'd be using their phone or reading, and the dog can just freely roam and do what they want. And then as soon as the dog would spontaneously perform an action, such as lying down, or they would go to drink water, the owner would call the dog and ask them to do the repeat command. And this was only done once per dog to make sure that they don't form expectations, which I understand why they did that, but it makes me feel like you can't really draw many conclusions because you've only done it once. But I suppose they did it on 10 different dogs, so I don't know. Anyway, then they also repeated this test, but using an object. So they put 4 toys in the familiar area, and then when the dog performed an action towards the toy, so it could be sniffing it or licking it or picking it up or something, the owner would call the dog over and then do the repeat command then. So then the dog would go back and then do whatever they wanted to do. So we found that there was no statistically difference between the dog's ability to repeat their own actions compared to that first repeating test that they did, which means 7 out of 10 dogs successfully repeated their own actions. Do you want to take a stab at guessing which 3 dogs didn't?
Chihuahua.
The one Chihuahua? Maybe the poodle? Are poodles smart?
I feel like we're kind of discriminating against the more aesthetic dogs here.
Some people would argue that Chihuahuas are very aesthetically pleasing.
No, that's what I mean. I think we're being prejudiced against the aesthetically pleasing dogs.
Wait, you think Chihuahuas are aesthetically pleasing?
Not particularly.
They're like icons.
They're like an accessory.
Okay, fine.
Do you know what I mean? They're like a designer dog or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, fine.
I also think that we're neglecting the mixed breeds because we don't know what they are.
That's true. I do feel they should have told us what. Well, maybe they don't know what mixes they are.
Maybe there's no difference in dog brains. Maybe we're like going too much into the surface.
Dogs are people too.
There must be differences in their dog brains, like how dogs have evolved to have different things, like working dogs and not working dogs.
I just don't see how else they would have got around using such a random selection of breeds and then like generalizing. Do you know what I mean?
I reckon they just couldn't get 10 dogs of the same breed that are good enough to do this test.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think this was more of an issue of recruitment rather than,
What, did they have an inclusion criteria?
They didn't say. Well, I didn't read that bit if there was. It wasn't if it's not in the main body of the paper, I didn't read it. Jamal's is looking.
Methods. That is the main body of the paper.
They don't talk about that in the methods.
What?
Do you think it's their pet?
I don't know. They just said owners. What, their own dogs with owners.
Okay.
That's nice. They're not orphans.
Yeah. Okay.
That would be exploitation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So they've done these spontaneous action tests, which is a bit more, it's not trained situation. So they're saying that this is proof of episodic memory. And they do need to control for these, just to make sure that these aren't actions that the dog would have done anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So what they did is they repeated these tests, but when they called the dog over, they just didn't give the repeat command. And that's it. And basically all the dogs passed that test. They also needed to have a word control so that the dog won't just respond to any word and that repeat is the specific word that they are responding to. Mm-hmm. The dog was asked to perform an action that they had done previously. Oh no, I've confused myself. Hang on a minute. But quick silent Jamal's a fact. There is no recruitment information about the dogs, so we don't know how these dogs were chosen.
Right.
So with this word control, they were so they call the dog over, but instead of saying repeat, they would say a word that had no meaning to the dog. The examples that they give, which I think might be the only two words that they were allowed to use, was blue or farfalla. I don't know what farfalla means.
It means butterfly.
Oh, what? How do you know that?
It's Italian.
Oh.
It's like the pasta, the farfalle. It's a little butterfly shape.
Oh.
There you go.
Okay, so they were asked to say blue but why were they asked to say blue in English but farfalla in like that in Italian?
Maybe it means nothing in dog language.
Oh. Okay. Do you think they had to go through like a list of words to see if there's any words that these dogs don't know, and then these are the two that they ended up with?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Anyway, so it was the same thing as above, and all dogs except two stood in their position before doing something else. So they were waiting for another command, like the repeat command, but that didn't happen. One just looked at the owner and then walked away, and then one decided to just have a lie down. So the final test they did was to have a delayed spontaneous test. So they basically repeated that test that we talked about, where they were asked to do something, where they were asked to repeat an action that they did spontaneously. But they would do it with a delay. So they would have it with 20 seconds in between, 1 minute in between the repeat command, and then 1 hour between the action and the repeat command. Mm-hmm. During this delay, just to stop the dogs from doing anything else, they would keep them in a crate. But what they did find was that the success of these dogs being able to repeat their own actions did decline with time. So after a 20-second delay, after a 20-second delay, 7 out of 10 dogs were successful in repeating their action, which means it was still not statistically different from baseline. So with that 20-second delay, the dogs are still good. After a 1 minute delay, though, unfortunately, only 6 out of 10 dogs were able to repeat their action, and after 1 hour, 4 out of 10 dogs were able to repeat that action. But those fucking 4 dogs, that's clever.
Yeah.
Well done.
If you told me to repeat something I did an hour ago, I would not remember what I did.
I bet you they were the border collie.
100% the border collie.
Maybe the sheepdog.
Yeah. Well, there were 5 border collies though.
Yeah. Maybe 2 of them are lazy.
Maybe.
Or old.
Maybe. Oh, that's a good point as well. We probably need to know how old. Like, these dogs should be the same age. They should be like in the same point of development, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Great. So Alice asked, how does this study do it, and what's going on? So basically, they are saying that this provides experimental evidence for the first time that dogs have self-representation of their own actions, and they have the episodic like memory to recall these actions that they did. And this is shown because dogs have this ability to redo spontaneous actions that were performed by themselves in the past. And they were able to repeat these actions irrespective of whether they were in the training or not. So even if they were trained, even if they weren't trained to repeat these actions, they were still able to repeat them and remember that it's something that they did.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so basically they're saying that this ability to, remember your own actions and relying on your episodic memory is a really important building block to represent the self. This is when it starts to get a bit philosophical psychology again. Saying that your ability to represent the self is what we talked about earlier, where it's many, many different dimensions of what is going on. So, your visual representation of yourself, your societal, emotional, blah, blah, blah. And they're saying basically, because that is so complex, this doesn't necessarily prove that dogs have this full ability to have self-representation, but it's one form of it that has evolved specifically in dogs. And that's the end of the paper.
Okay.
Please don't ask me what's the point, because I don't know.
Okay, well then I have no more questions.
It'd be interesting to know, because obviously humans have a much more developed and complicated brain. So it'd be interesting to know if the sort of the little dog brains, if it's showing up in the same regions as humans and they've got like a sort of far less developed version of we've got, or if it's a completely different thing at all. Because if it's a sort of if it's not really, because it doesn't really sort of prove that the dogs know really anything about themselves, does it? It just calls physical action. So it could be a sort of more of a memory in their movement part of their brain. There's so many places it could go that's not to do with them understanding themselves and more to do with their reaction and learning how to get the things that they want, if you see what I mean. Because dogs are trained to do stuff, right? So there's a part of their brain that or their development that they're used to following commands, and they know to a degree that if they follow a command of someone, then they're going to get something. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's them understanding that they have a self.
Yeah,
I feel there's a gap.
Yeah, I agree. I do think the ultimate goal of work like this is to break down the complexity of humans, right, and see if we can see it in other animals. But I do agree that I don't think this necessarily proves that dogs are aware or have a higher conscious way of thinking.
Yeah, I feel like you'd have to work out what regions of the brain and then compare it with humans, because then you'd have more of a framework. Because if we don't actually understand what dogs know and how their brains work around certain things, then we are sort of guessing. I mean, it's definitely a sort of stepping stone for further sort of research that they can do these things. It's not pointless to go further with it, but I don't know, it seems quite premature to sort of draw conclusions on it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe if they'd given the dogs EEGs or something.
Yeah, that would have been good.
Yeah, if they do it to babies, they can do it to dogs.
Exactly. That would have looked really cute as well. Little flashing cap.
To get around their ears.
Yeah.
Oh, don't EEG pads need to have no hair to stick properly?
No, because you can put EEGs on adult humans with hair.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And you can't, I don't know.
Like, not everyone that gets an EEG gets their head shaped.
Oh, true. I suppose there's that cap.
Move around too
Yeah.
much. I've had occasionally, like, psychological experiments, they've had to like discount people who move their heads too much. So maybe they have to get like a proper, like, stock one for a dog.
Yeah, well, they might have to sedate the dog or something.
But then they couldn't ask the dog to do the action.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The dogs did nothing.
Yeah, true. All dogs failed the test.
Sadly. Contrary to what we thought would happen.
But I mean, I don't know. I guess it is an interesting thing, and it does. And I suppose I shouldn't be such a dick and be like, there's no point to this work, because, you know, the point of science is to discover unanswered questions, right?
Yeah.
And this is still an unanswered question. Just because it has no, like, there's no clear link to humans doesn't mean it's not important.
Yeah, I think there could be a clear link to humans. It's just that there needs to be a little bit more to sort of see that it is, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
But yeah, but I think also, like, you know, the whole notion of the self has been like debated in psychology ever since the word like became part of the dictionary, you know. And the fact is, they're sort of basing the idea of like self-representation on episodic memory, which is just one way of, you know, of doing it. So it's definitely interesting, but there's so many more factors to it that yeah, you kind of just need to get, like, do these things, I guess, and see what comes of it and where to go next.
Yeah, I mean, to credit to these guys, they do say in the paper that episodic memory is just one very small part of self-representation, and that they do say at the end that this doesn't necessarily show that these dogs have this conceptual knowledge of themselves, but it's maybe a small part of evidence that there is something going on. So credit to themselves, they've been very, like, you know, they haven't exaggerated their findings in any way. I just want to play with dogs.
Is that why you picked the paper? You wanted to read about the dog?
Kind of.
Yeah, like, why not? I think it'd be quite interesting as well, like, because it kind of, another thing that I don't really understand in humans either is like the difference between short-term and long-term memory, because it could be that if the dogs have like really limited versions of our, like, you know, primitive versions, if you like, of what we have, then it could be that like their time references are different, because you said that the dogs were good after a minute and then less good after an hour and stuff like that. Yeah, I'd just be interested to know if the dogs had the same physiology of these memories that humans do, but in a much more limited way, or if it's completely different, because it could be a difference in short term and long term for them, but on a much smaller scale, if you see what I mean.
I mean, we've said in a previous episode before that the memory is really, really highly debated still within science. We really don't know much about memory. We know that there's different types of memory, but there's so much debate even just about how memory is stored. And it's just really hard to research memory and that kind of stuff. Like, most brain related things are really hard because we can't look at your brain. But I do wonder if, like the dog's memory thing, I do think it's an evolutionary thing, because dogs, I mean, essentially, if you look at a wild dog and how they how they would behave or they survive, they are literally just surviving, right? So maybe they don't really need to remember things that happened an hour ago or 2 hours ago, because they just need to be able to survive in the moment. Maybe, I don't know.
I'm wondering about because dogs are social animals, aren't they? And yet, so I wonder how, because you hear about dogs that remember their owners after months and months and months apart. So I wonder, like, what part of the sort of social side of it comes into their memory too, because that's a long time. So it's not a movement, but they have an aspect of them that can remember perhaps social links. And because if they used to be in packs and stuff, then they would need to know who was part of them.
Yeah.
But maybe that's a sensory thing. I know that dogs have like senses of smell and stuff. But again, that's a memory thing too. So maybe, yeah, the social, I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure. But the social thing, yeah, different type.
I would think that maybe that comes from the fact that they're pack animals.
Yeah, I would say so too. My mum always refers to my dog and calls us her pack.
That's really cute.
And it's really funny because when we were growing up, I think my like dog thought that maybe she outranked my youngest brother because he was the smallest. She used to try and like bully him and like jump on top of him, where she wouldn't do that with the rest of us. It's quite funny.
Oh my god, I thought dogs were like really gentle around babies.
Well, no, he wasn't a baby. He was like I think when we got her, he would have been like.
Oh my god, I thought you were gonna say when we got him. I was like, wait, hang on.
got my brother.
Yeah. But like that day when we brought him home from that bin. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, we got Lola.
Cute.
Yeah.
I went back onto this webpage where I was learning about self-representation today. And I just wanted to say a little bit more about it because, well, I just thought this was interesting. So basically they said that the first time that the self in speech bubbles, in speech marks, was coined in the late 1800s. And basically, just to put it simply, there are two types of the self. There is the I self and me self. The I self reflects what people see or perceive themselves doing in the physical world, e.g. recognizing that. Huh?
Do you have the psychologist that said this?
William James.
Yeah.
He is saying that, so I self is the physical world, so you recognize that you're walking, eating, or writing, whereas me self is a subjective and psychological phenomenon referring to your reflection about yourself, so the way you characterize yourself in personality traits. And this me self of your of your personality can be broken down into more things. So it'll be your material self, so the possessions that we collect for ourselves, your social self, how we interact and portray ourselves in different groups and situations, and our spiritual self, which is our like internal moral shit. That's it, really. I don't know, it's quite interesting.
I did an essay on the self, which is how I knew that. So I'm getting flashbacks to that horrifying essay. But yeah, there's so many like theories of the self. But that was the first one. There's been small ones recently that are about sort of social identity, and so it's called social identity theory. And like there are some where basically our entire notion of the self actually comes from our social placements, and that people can't actually have an idea of the self in an isolated situation. Like we are constantly sort of like placing ourselves into either groups or just comparisons, and that's how we know where we stand. And without other people, we don't actually have a basis to kind of understand ourselves. Before this, it was much more individualistic, and it's sort of more about the mind and like the sort of more internal. But yeah, it's like it's been sort of 150 years of people debating, but at the moment it's quite social based, I think, and it sounds quite legit, I think.
So are you saying that if you guys didn't exist, I don't exist?
No. Is it more about what you think of yourself rather than
I think
exist?
it's about how you understand yourself.
Yeah, which you're saying that people are saying you can't understand yourself if you don't have a social setting to place yourself in, right?
Yeah, but understand yourself is different to existing.
Okay.
Well, I actually don't know. That's just what I think. Is that right?
Well, I don't know, because do you exist if you don't understand that you are a person?
Yeah. I suppose, yeah, I mean, you're going to be alive, aren't you? If someone like put you in a room, which they shouldn't, but if someone put you in a room when you were born and then just like gave you the thing to stay alive, but gave you no other human beings to talk to or any reference or anything, then you would be alive. Like you would exist. People could know you exist.
I'm gonna ask, like, not as extreme as that, but you know, people who are like hermits and don't like stay away from people and like probably would have been with people when they were younger, but now they're not. Like, how did that work then? Did you like, what's their concept of self?
Well, they probably would have made the conscious decision to be outside. You see what I mean? They would know that there is an outside world and they've chosen not to live in it. Like, it's, the social world is there. It's only if you don't have any concept of it that you could actually take it away.
Yeah.
So
Which
their self is like, I don't belong in society, therefore I will put myself outside of society, and that is them having self-representation. So I guess the only way to not have yourself would be if you were deprived of learning about that from a very young age, from a baby.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you were kept in a room with no mirrors or nothing, then you'd have no self.
They think, because in this babies documentary that you should totally watch, they think that like when babies are like moving around and stuff, they're linking up the movements they did in the womb, what they couldn't see, with suddenly the fact they can see. You should watch the documentary. It's good.
It does sound good.
Mad.
I'm also giving myself a headache.
Yeah, like this is one of those things that you could just think yourself in circles for like hours.
Yeah, this is one of those conversations where if we'd had a few drinks, this would go on all night.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
This was my least favorite essay that I had to write.
Or if we smoked some weed, I bet we'd really get to the bottom of things.
Oh yeah, for sure. We'd be solving everyone's world issues through the self.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
We'd write papers.
I guess it's a very like theoretical part of science that we don't normally deal with. So it's a bit crazy to think that there's this whole theory, like the scientific theory in fields that doesn't actually rely on evidence. It's just concepts and thoughts.
Yeah, I feel like it's less that there's like doesn't rely on evidence and more that we can't measure it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it's not quantitative evidence.
Yeah, or like you can only test for like aspects of it, you can't test for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Damn, that got really deep. Sophie, before we close, do you have any final questions about the dogs?
Well, surely you can't answer them because there's no recruitment information. So I have so many questions about the dogs, but you don't have the answers, Curie.
Like, what are the dogs called? What are their names? Are they a good boy?
What's your favourite breed of dog?
I like big dogs. So, in an ideal world, if I could have it my way, I want a husky. But I know that I would never be in a position where I can give the husky as much exercise as it needs. So I'd like a German Shepherd. And I'd like a German Shepherd called Bruno. And then I used to want a pug called Oscar, but then I found out that you shouldn't really encourage pugs and stuff because they have lots of health problems. And I also kind of want a sausage dog called Elmo. And I want a Shar-Pei called Jackie Chan.
I love that.
What about you?
Ever since watching that film, was it called Beethoven? The one with the dog called Beethoven. Ever since I've seen that film when I was like a small child, I wanted that dog. And also the dog that lives near us, it's huge, and we call it Bear Dog because it looks like a bear. So yeah, I kind of want one of those. The kind that put toddlers on and they can ride around.
Cute. What's your favourite dog, Alice?
I know this is a really basic answer, but there's just something so cute about Labradors and Retrievers because they always just look like they're smiling.
I definitely thought you were going to say a Chihuahua after all of that. I thought you were going to be like, here's my Chihuahua in my handbag.
No, Chihuahuas look like rats with longer legs.
You like rats?
I do like rats, that's true. Like I honestly, I think I'd find it difficult to not love any dog, really. I quite like big dogs because I always think that I know this isn't always the case, it's definitely a generalization, but like I find that like I think because bigger dogs always seem to be slightly calmer.
No, I think that's the thing.
Yeah, and then small dogs like Jack Russells and stuff are really vicious because obviously they don't, they've got the whole size matters like inferiority complex in their head, so they just
got little man syndrome.
Little man syndrome, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
I agree. I also find that small dogs are just so much noisier. Like they're so yappy.
Yeah.
The big dogs. And I really like the fact that my future dog will be able to jump on me and I can cuddle them compared to like a little dog that can't. You know?
Good criteria.
Indeed.
Like I'll even, my sister had a American Cocker Spaniel, which I believe are considered medium-sized dogs. I'll go, that's my limit on size.
Okay. I feel like you spent a lot of time thinking about this.
I really want a dog. Cool. Well, Sophie, thank you very much for finally coming back on as our regular lay. I mean, we've asked you this whole time and you just never turn up, so
It's not our fault.
I feel like I've been fired for knowing things, and I'm really sorry.
Well, you know what they say, you can be overqualified for a job.
She lied in her interview.
This is like when I once applied for jobs when people apply for jobs in like McDonald's and they don't get them because they're overqualified. This is what's happened. We are McDonald's and you are overqualified.
Oh man.
Except you lied in your interview, so we hired you.
I feel like I should have like pretended to not know anything so I could have kept my job here.
I mean, for now, like we said, you haven't been fired. We've just added conditions to your employment.
Yeah. We're on a probationary period now.
Yeah, let's call this probation, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Just don't do psychology, and I promise I will not know anything. I probably don't actually know anything about psychology, but I know some words.
I also noticed how you didn't reveal until literally the end of the podcast that you literally wrote an essay on the self.
Well, if you'd said to me, we're going to talk about episodic memory and the self, I'd be like, I know so much about that. Dog memory or sleep and food. And I was like, oh.
Okay, fine, my bad. Okay, well, thank you very much for coming back. Thank you to everyone at home for listening. You may have noticed that we're being much better now. We're actually on somewhat of a schedule again, so that's good. And if you want to, what am I doing? I'm having a brain fart.
If you would like to email us,
yeah.
We would love to hear from you. And you can do that on layitout@gmail.com.
No!
Layidoutpodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah, and you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Our Instagram, which has basically died, on @layoutpodcast. And otherwise, we will see you in 2 weeks' time. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
We are recording. I'm avoiding a legal snag by telling you that you are being recorded. Okay.
Jerry, I don't think you did that last week.
Oh.
So I'm gonna sue.